In the heart of a bustling Sacramento supermarket, the typical Tuesday evening buzz was punctuated by the rhythmic beeps of checkout scanners and the gentle murmur of conversations among shoppers. The aisles were a mosaic of everyday people engaging in the mundane yet comforting ritual of grocery shopping, their carts gradually filling with essentials ranging from crisp produce to the humdrum of frozen dinners. Amid this ordinary scene wandered James Carter, a 45-year-old retired Army captain now forging a career in logistics. With his military days behind him, James' appearance was nondescript, a simple dark blue hoodie paired with jeans. His demeanor was calm and unassuming as he navigated the dairy section, his eyes scanning for almond milk. His service uniform, a relic of his past life, lay folded and tucked away in his home, symbolizing a neatly compartmentalized chapter of his history. As James extended his hand to retrieve a carton from the shelf, he felt an unsettling sensation, a gaze piercing through the anonymity he had wrapped around himself. Turning slightly, he noticed Officer Rachel Brooks standing rigidly at the end of the aisle. Her stark white police uniform cut a contrasting figure against the backdrop of casually dressed shoppers. It was clear she was not here for groceries. Her presence was purposeful, her eyes intently fixed on James. Initially, James' military training advised caution over confrontation. He offered Officer Brooks a polite nod, an olive branch of sorts, hoping to dispel any brewing tension. Yet, her response was a stone-toned gaze, her body language taut with unspoken questions. The intensity of her scrutiny suggested a purpose beyond mere curiosity, signaling the start of an unforeseen conflict. Despite the growing unease, James continued on his path, steering his cart toward the aisle of canned goods. With each backward glance, he found Officer Brooks a few paces too close, her hand ominously near her holstered weapon. The store's familiar soundscape faded into the background as a knot of anxiety tightened within him. He reassured himself that perhaps she was merely exercising vigilance, but his comfort was short-lived. By the time he reached the frozen foods section, the reality became undeniable. Officer Brooks was shadowing him, her watchful eyes following each of his movements with calculated interest. Clutching the handle of his cart tighter, James attempted to mask his growing concern, focusing on selecting his groceries as if each choice might ward off the looming confrontation. The tension escalated silently as James paused in the produce section, carefully picking out a bunch of fresh spinach, his preference for simple, healthy meals a holdover from his disciplined military lifestyle. Just as he turned to deposit the spinach into his cart, Officer Brooks' voice shattered the mundane atmosphere, crisp and authoritative. "Excuse me, sir. I need to speak with you." James faced her, his expression a mask of composure honed by years of command. "Is there a problem, officer?" he inquired, his tone measured and controlled. Officer Brooks stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she scrutinized James from head to toe. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice laced with suspicion. Surprised by her direct accusation, James responded with a flicker of incredulity. "I'm grocery shopping, just like everyone else," he replied, gesturing toward his half-filled cart. Her gaze flicked momentarily to the cart and then back to him with increased scrutiny. "I'm going to need to see some identification," she insisted. James' response was a soft, disbelieving chuckle. "Identification? For buying spinach and almond milk?" He maintained his composure, though his voice carried a hint of irony. "With all due respect, officer, I haven't done anything wrong. Why do you need my ID?" Her posture stiffened, and her hand touched her holster, a subtle but clear escalation. "Sir, I'm not going to ask again. Show me your ID," she stated firmly, her voice carrying an edge of finality. As the tension palpably thickened, the surrounding shoppers began to take notice, casting curious and concerned glances their way. James inhaled deeply, choosing his words with care. "Look, I don't know what you think I've done, but I'm not required to show ID just because I'm walking through a store. If there's a specific accusation, let's address that. Otherwise, I'd like to finish my shopping." Officer Brooks' face reddened, her tone sharpening as she stepped closer. I saw you acting suspiciously, walking up and down the aisles as if you were casing the place. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. James, no stranger to groundless accusations, felt a familiar frustration bubble within him. This wasn't a battlefield or a military outpost. This was a supermarket, a place where anonymity should have been his shield. Yet, here he was, being singled out and scrutinized. Before James could formulate a response, Officer Brooks' voice escalated, capturing the attention of an ever-growing audience. If you're refusing to cooperate, I'll have no choice but to take further action. James Carter's heart raced, not from personal fear, but from the swift escalation of the encounter. He raised his hands in a gesture of compliance, signaling his intent to cooperate. I'm cooperating, officer. I'm just asking for a little respect, he said. However, respect was not forthcoming. The officer's next command shattered the store's usual calm. Hands where I can see them now, she barked, her hand gripping the handle of her gun. The everyday routine of shopping froze into a stunned silence, the air thick with tension. Customers halted, their eyes shifting nervously between James and the officer. Despite his extensive military training for high-stress scenarios, nothing had prepared James for this confrontation in a supermarket aisle, far from any battlefield but equally fraught with danger. Families with children paused, the kids clutching their parents' hands tightly. Keeping his hands visibly raised, James tried to diffuse the situation with a steady, calm voice. Officer, there's no need for this. I've done nothing wrong. However, the officer's eyes blazed with suspicion, her voice firm and unyielding. Get down on the ground now. James hesitated. The thought of lying on the grimy supermarket floor was humiliating. But with a growing crowd around him, their smartphones raised and recording, the stakes were crystal clear. Any wrong move could escalate the situation disastrously. Slowly, he crouched and then knelt, his dignity compromised under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Stay down, the officer commanded, drawing her gun and pointing it at him. The crowd gasped in shock. A mother shielded her child's eyes, and an older man expressed his discontent loudly. What is she doing? He hasn't done anything. From his position on the ground, James spoke up, his voice steady but firm. Officer, I am a retired senior Army officer. I have served this country for over 2 decades. This, whatever this is, it's not right. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. He hasn't done anything, one man yelled. The store manager, Greg, rushed in, followed by Trevor, a young security guard. What's going on here? Greg demanded, his voice steady but firm. Trevor interjected, having monitored the situation through security cameras. Ma'am, I've been watching the cameras. This gentleman hasn't done anything suspicious. He's just been shopping. After a tense moment, Officer Brooks finally stepped back and holstered her weapon. You're free to go, she muttered. James rose slowly, dusting off his jeans. Free to go? I've been humiliated in front of all these people, treated like a criminal. And for what? Because I'm shopping while black? As he left the store, the videos captured that night ignited a firestorm online, one that would demand accountability and spark a national conversation about racial profiling and injustice.